Welcome back to LingaCode Technologies. We've been deep in this world of agentic AI, and I, for one, well, I'm not getting any less concerned about the security implications.
I'd say that's a healthy amount of concern to have. We're dealing with systems that can, let's face it, make decisions with far-reaching consequences.
Right, and we just wrapped up a whole series on, just getting a handle on the OWASP document, Agentic AI Threats and Mitigations.
And it's a dense document, a lot to unpack there, but so important.
Absolutely. So today, this deep dive is, you guessed it, Agentic AI Threats and Mitigations, Part 2.
Part two, we're getting into the nitty-gritty now.
Exactly. We're going deep specifically into the threat model section. And, for our listeners out there, this is part of our listening series, which is all about raising security awareness. We want to give you the tools and knowledge to really understand the risks and what we can do about them.
It's about empowering people to engage with this technology safely and responsibly.
Absolutely. So no more beating around the bush. Let's jump right into that threat model section.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, so first up, we have T1 memory poisoning. I gotta say, even the name sounds kind of creepy, like we're messing with the AI's memories.
It's a pretty evocative name, I'll give you that, but it captures the essence of the threat really well. We're talking about exploiting the AI's memory systems, both short-term and long-term, by introducing malicious or false data.
Okay, back up a sec. When we say memory, what does that even mean for an AI? It's not like it's got a brain like we do, right?
Right, it's not a biological brain, but the analogy holds. Think of it this way. An AI needs to store information, both the immediate context of its current interaction and the knowledge it's acquired over time. That stored information, that's its memory. And just like our memories can influence our decisions, an AI's memory is fundamental to its reasoning and actions.
Okay, so that makes sense. Now, the poisoning part, how does that actually happen?
Well, there are a few ways to inject this bad data. One is direct prompt injection, where an attacker essentially crafts malicious input that manipulates the data the AI stores in its memory. This could be used to bypass security checks or to directly influence the AI's decision-making.
So you're feeding it bad information, hoping it treats it as truth.
Exactly. Now, this can target both short-term and long-term memory. Short-term memory attacks typically exploit the limitations of the AI's context window, which is the amount of information it can actively process at any given time.
Okay, so like overwhelm it with so much stuff that it loses track of what's real and what's not.
In a sense, yes. You could flood the context window with manipulated data, or you could try to force the AI to repeat sensitive operations based on a false premise you've introduced.
And I'm guessing the long-term stuff is where things get really scary.
Oh, absolutely. Injecting false information that persists across sessions that can have lasting and widespread consequences. You're essentially corrupting the AI's knowledge base, its fundamental understanding of the world. This could lead to it unknowingly revealing sensitive data, making incorrect assessments, or even granting unauthorized access based on this flawed knowledge.
So not just messing up a single interaction, but potentially poisoning the well for all future interactions.
Exactly. It's a much more insidious and long-lasting attack.
Okay, so how does this bad data actually get into the AI's memory in the first place? Like, what are the attack vectors?
Well, as we mentioned, direct prompt injection is one way, especially for targeting an isolated memory instance within a specific user's interaction. But what's even more concerning is exploiting shared memory.
Shared memory, so like a central repository of knowledge that multiple AI agents or users might be drawing from?
Precisely. If an attacker can inject bad data into that shared pool of knowledge, the impact is multiplied. It can affect multiple users, corrupt the decision-making of multiple agents, and have far-reaching consequences for the entire system.
That definitely raises the stakes. Now, I noticed the document also makes some connections to other areas of AWSP's work, like the risks associated with data poisoning and training data sets and vulnerabilities in vector databases.
Right, it's all interconnected. Memory poisoning in agentic AI builds upon and extends the risks we've already identified with static data poisoning and model training, which is covered in LLM 04.2025. But the dynamic and persistent nature of agent memory creates a whole new set of challenges.
It's not just about securing the initial training data anymore. You have to worry about the AI continuously learning and potentially absorbing bad information as it operates.
Exactly. And then there's the issue of vector databases, which many agentic AI systems rely on for efficient long-term memory retrieval. These databases use embeddings to represent information as vectors, and those embeddings can be manipulated, which is the focus of LLM 08.2025.
So an attacker could potentially tamper with those embeddings to skew the AI's memory recall, making it retrieve incorrect or malicious information.
Precisely. It adds another layer of complexity to securing these systems.
Okay, all this is pretty abstract. Let's talk concrete scenarios. The document gives some really vivid examples of how memory poisoning could play out in the real world. The one about the travel booking AI being tricked into giving away free chartered flights because of a false pricing rule really stood out to me.
Right, it's a classic example of how a seemingly small piece of misinformation can have a huge financial impact. By repeatedly reinforcing that fabricated pricing rule in the AI's memory, the attacker essentially convinces the AI that chartered flights are free, bypassing all the payment checks and safeguards.
And what about the scenario where an attacker exploits the context window limitations to gain unauthorized admin access?
That's a really clever attack that highlights the importance of understanding how an AI's short-term memory works. By carefully structuring their interactions across multiple sessions, the attacker can prevent the AI from piecing together the full sequence of actions, effectively masking the privilege escalation attempt.
So the AI never sees the complete picture, only fragments of the attack, and therefore doesn't recognize the malicious intent.
Exactly. It's a form of deception that leverages the AI's cognitive limitations.
The example of gradually poisoning a security AI to misclassify malicious activity as normal is especially chilling. You're basically rendering the security system useless from within.
It's a classic subversion tactic. By slowly introducing false negative data into the security AI's memory, the attacker trains it to ignore or misinterpret real threats, creating a huge blind spot in the system's defenses.
And then there's the scenario of shared memory poisoning affecting customer service agents, leading to incorrect refund policies and widespread chaos.
That one really illustrates the potential real-world consequences of memory poisoning. It's not just about theoretical risks. It can directly impact a company's bottom line, customer satisfaction, and reputation.
Okay, enough doom and gloom. Let's talk solutions. What are some effective strategies for defending against these memory-based attacks?
Well, the document outlines several key mitigation approaches. Firstly, we need robust memory content validation. This means constantly checking that the data stored in and recalled from the AI's memory aligns with expected formats, values, and sources.
So like sanity checks to ensure the information makes sense and comes from a trustworthy place.
Exactly. And then there's session isolation, which is crucial in multi-user systems. You want to prevent cross-contamination, where one user's actions or inputs accidentally or intentionally poison the memory of other users.
Right, so keep things compartmentalized to limit the potential damage.
Absolutely. We also need strong authentication for memory access. You don't want just anyone messing with the AI's knowledge base.
Makes sense. What about using AI itself to help defend against these attacks?
That's a good point. The document suggests using AI-powered anomaly detection systems to monitor for suspicious patterns of memory access and content changes. And it also recommends generating AI memory snapshots for forensic analysis, which can help us understand what the AI knew at a specific point in time and potentially roll back the memory to a clean state if needed.
So fight fire with fire, using AI to protect AI.
In a way, yes. It's about leveraging the same technology for both attack and defense.
Okay, that gives us a good overview of memory poisoning. Let's move on to T2 tool misuse. It seems like this one is all about how an AI can be tricked into using its tools for malicious purposes, even if it's technically operating within its permitted boundaries.
That's a good summary. We're not necessarily talking about exploiting vulnerabilities in the tools themselves, but rather in how the AI is instructed to use them. It's a form of indirect exploitation.
So the AI has the tools, but it's being manipulated into using them in ways that were never intended.
Exactly. And this is where the attacker's understanding of the AI's capabilities and its potential to chain together different actions becomes really important.
So it's not about a single malicious command, but rather a sequence of seemingly innocuous actions that, when combined, lead to a harmful outcome.
Precisely. The attacker is essentially exploiting the AI's intelligence and its ability to orchestrate complex workflows. And because each individual step might appear legitimate, detecting these attacks can be very difficult.
And the document emphasizes that this is different from traditional exploits because of this complexity and the AI's ability to string together these actions in ways that humans might not even anticipate.
Right, it's not like finding a buffer overflow in a piece of code. We're dealing with a much more fluid and adaptive adversary that can leverage the AI's reasoning capabilities to achieve its goals.
And this is especially concerning in critical systems where the AI is making decisions that have real-world consequences. Like, imagine an AI controlling a power grid or a financial system being tricked into misusing its tools.
The potential for disruption and damage is huge. And the fact that many agentic AI systems rely on natural language interfaces, while user-friendly, also increases the attack surface.
Because it's easier to craft deceptive prompts in natural language than it is to directly manipulate code or exploit traditional interfaces.
Exactly. The flexibility of natural language can be a double-edged sword in this context.
And again, this isn't a standalone threat. The document connects tool misuse to several other OWASP concepts like excessive agency, supply chain risks, and vulnerabilities in vector embeddings.
Right, it all ties together. Tool misuse is partially addressed by the concept of excessive agency, which we've talked about before. It's about ensuring that the AI doesn't have too much autonomy and that there are appropriate safeguards in place.
So even if the AI is technically allowed to use a certain tool, we need to carefully consider the context and potential consequences of that use.
Precisely. And then there's the supply chain aspect. The security of the tools themselves becomes critical. If an attacker can compromise a tool that the AI has access to, they can indirectly control the AI's actions.
It's like a backdoor into the AI system through a compromised tool.
Exactly. And finally, there's the connection to vector embeddings and RAG, or Retrieval Augmented Generation. If an AI is using RAG to retrieve information from a vector database, and then using that information to guide its tool usage, manipulating the retrieval process can lead to tool misuse.
So if the AI is getting bad information from the database, it might make bad decisions about how to use its tools.
Precisely. It highlights the importance of securing the entire information pipeline that the AI relies on.
Okay, let's ground this in some real-world scenarios. The example of parameter pollution in a booking system is a good illustration of how an attacker can manipulate the AI to achieve a specific financially motivated goal.
Right. In that scenario, the attacker understands how the AI interacts with the booking system's API or internal functions and crafts prompts that manipulate the booking parameters. It's like tricking the AI into reserving way more seats than intended, potentially for resale or to disrupt the service.
And then there's the example of tool chain manipulation, where the AI is tricked into extracting sensitive data and emailing it externally.
That's a classic data breach scenario. The AI might have the legitimate ability to query customer records and send emails, but the attacker exploits its workflow to combine those actions in an unauthorized sequence, leading to a data leak.
And the final scenario, where a document processor is tricked into mass distributing phishing documents, shows how AI can be weaponized to scale up malicious activities.
Absolutely. In that case, the attacker is leveraging the AI's automation capabilities to amplify their attack, potentially reaching a much larger audience than they could on their own.
Okay, so prevention strategies. What are some key ways to mitigate the risks of tool misuse?
Well, first and foremost, we need strict tool access verification. Each AI agent should only have access to the absolute minimum set of tools required for its designated tasks.
So least privilege, just like with traditional security.
Exactly. We also need to closely monitor tool usage patterns for any anomalies or unexpected behavior. Anything out of the ordinary should raise a red flag.
Continuous monitoring is key.
Absolutely. And then we need to make sure that the AI's instructions are clear, unambiguous, and properly validated. We don't want the AI misinterpreting a command or being tricked into doing something it shouldn't.
So clear boundaries and strict validation procedures.
Precisely. And finally, detailed execution logs are essential. We need to know exactly what tools the AI is using, when and why, so we can track down any potential misuse.
A good audit trail is always important.
It's especially crucial in this context.
Okay, let's move on to T3, privilege compromise. It seems like this one is all about attackers trying to gain elevated access within the AI system itself.
That's the essence of it. We're talking about exploiting weaknesses in the AI's permission management mechanisms to gain unauthorized privileges.
So it's not just misusing existing permissions, but actually gaining new ones that you shouldn't have.
Exactly. And this is where the dynamic nature of permissions in agentic AI systems becomes a real challenge. AI agents can inherit permissions based on context, task, or user interaction, which creates a lot of potential attack surface.
It's not always clear why an agent has a certain level of access, which makes it difficult to track down and prevent privilege escalation.
Right. It's not as simple as looking at a static access control list. The permissions are constantly shifting and changing based on the AI's current state and actions.
And the document emphasizes that this is amplified by the fact that AI agents often operate across multiple interconnected systems. So it's not just about compromising a single application. You could potentially gain access to a whole network of systems.
Precisely. And because AI agents are designed to be autonomous and adaptable, enforcing traditional security boundaries becomes much more difficult.
It's like trying to contain a fluid that can morph and shift its shape to slip through any cracks it finds.
That's a good analogy. And this is another area where the concept of excessive agency comes into play. We need to be very careful about how much autonomy we give these AI agents, especially when it comes to their ability to access and modify sensitive data or systems.
So striking that balance between giving AI the flexibility to do its job effectively and ensuring that it doesn't have the freedom to do things it shouldn't.
Exactly. It's a delicate balancing act.
Let's dive into some scenarios. The example of dynamic permission escalation, where an attacker tricks the AI into gaining and retaining admin privileges, seems like a classic but effective technique.
Right. It's all about exploiting weaknesses in the AI's logic or configuration to gain unauthorized access that persists even after the initial interaction.
The scenario of cross-system authorization exploitation really highlights the dangers of inadequate scope enforcement in interconnected systems.
Absolutely. If an AI agent can move between systems without proper checks and balances, an attacker could leverage a low-level compromise in one system to gain access to a much more sensitive system.
It's like a chain reaction of privilege escalation.
Exactly. And then there's the concept of shadow agent deployment, where an attacker creates a rogue AI agent that inherits the credentials of a legitimate one. This is particularly insidious because it allows for persistent, undetected malicious activity.
It's like having a spy within the system operating under the guise of a trusted entity.
Precisely. It underscores the importance of strong authentication and access control mechanisms within the AI deployment environment.
Okay, solutions. What are some key strategies for mitigating privilege compromise risks?
Well, granular permission controls are essential. We need to be able to define very specific permissions for each AI agent based on its role and tasks, following the principle of least privilege.
So no more giving agents blanket access to everything, just in case they might need it.
Exactly. We need to be much more precise and restrictive, and we need dynamic access validation. The system should continuously verify that the AI agent has the necessary permissions for every action it attempts to take, not just at the beginning of a session.
Continuous verification is key, given the dynamic nature of permissions in these systems.
Absolutely. We also need to closely monitor any role changes or privilege elevations. Anytime an AI agent gains more access, it should trigger an alert and a thorough review process.
Makes sense. And finally, we need to prevent unauthorized delegation of privileges between AI agents.
Right. Unless there's a very specific and secure workflow in place for delegation, agents should not be able to grant each other access without human approval.
It's about maintaining control and preventing privilege creep.
Exactly.
Okay, let's move on to T4 resource overload. This one sounds a bit more familiar, like a traditional denial of service attack, but tailored to the specific characteristics of AI systems.
That's a good way to think about it. Resource overload is about targeting an AI system's computational resources, memory, and dependencies on external services to degrade its performance or cause it to fail completely.
So it's like overwhelming the AI with too much work, too many requests, or by cutting off its access to the resources it needs to function.
Exactly. And because AI systems are often much more resource-intensive than traditional applications, they can be particularly vulnerable to these types of attacks.
What are some of the key factors that make AI so susceptible to resource overload?
Well, firstly, the very nature of AI inference, especially with deep learning models, can require a lot of computational power and memory. And then there's the fact that AI agents often rely on multiple external services and APIs to perform their tasks, which creates additional dependencies and potential points of failure.
So if you can disrupt those external services, you can effectively cripple the AI.
Precisely. And finally, many AI agents are designed to handle concurrent processing demands, which means they can be overwhelmed by a sudden surge in requests.
It's like a traffic jam in the AI's processing queue.
That's a good analogy.
And this is especially concerning in real-time or autonomous environments where any delay or failure can have immediate and potentially disastrous consequences.
Absolutely. Think of an autonomous vehicle AI being overloaded and unable to process sensor data quickly enough. The consequences could be catastrophic.
This also ties into the OWASP concept of unbounded consumption, where a system doesn't properly limit its resource usage.
Right. It's about ensuring that the AI doesn't consume resources in an uncontrolled or excessive way, whether intentionally or unintentionally.
Okay, let's look at some real-world scenarios. The example of forcing a security AI to perform overly complex analysis to delay its threat detection is a clever way to exploit resource limitations.
It's a form of targeted denial of service that specifically aims to disable or delay a critical security function.
And then there's the more traditional approach of simply overwhelming the AI with a flood of requests from multiple agents, effectively exhausting its computational capacity.
right? That's a brute force approach, but it can be very effective if the AI isn't properly protected.
And the API quota depletion example shows how an attacker can create financial headaches for an organization by forcing its AI to make excessive calls to external services.
Exactly. If you're not careful, you could end up with a huge bill from your API provider because your AI has been tricked into using up all your allocated resources.
And finally, the memory cascade failure scenario, where multiple complex tasks lead to system-wide memory exhaustion, sounds like it could bring down the entire infrastructure.
It's a worst-case scenario, but it highlights the importance of careful memory management in AI systems, especially when dealing with multiple agents and complex workflows.
Okay, let's talk mitigation strategies. How do we protect AI systems from these resource overload attacks?
Well, robust resource management controls are crucial. We need systems that can dynamically adjust resource allocation based on real-time demand and anticipated needs.
So being able to scale up or down as needed to handle fluctuations in workload.
Exactly. We also need to set strict resource quotas for individual agents and monitor overall system load to detect potential overload situations early on.
Continuous monitoring and proactive management are key.
Absolutely. And then there's the concept of rate limiting, which is particularly important for AI systems that interact with external APIs.
So setting limits on how often the AI can make calls to prevent it from being tricked into exhausting its quotas.
Precisely. It's about adding safeguards to prevent both accidental and malicious resource overconsumption.
Okay, that covers resource overload. Let's move on to T5 cascading hallucination attacks. I remember we talked a bit about AI hallucinations before, the tendency to generate false information, but this seems like a whole new level of concern.
It is. Hallucinations themselves are a problem, but when they cascade and amplify through agentic AI systems, the potential for harm increases exponentially.
So it's not just about the AI making a mistake, it's about that mistake spreading and becoming embedded in the system's knowledge base, potentially leading to a whole chain of bad decisions.
Exactly. It's like a virus of misinformation infecting the AI's understanding of the world. And because agentic AI systems often have memory and the ability to learn from their interactions, these hallucinations can become self-reinforcing, leading to increasingly inaccurate and potentially harmful outputs.
It's like the AI is building a house of cards on a foundation of falsehoods.
That's a good analogy. And because agentic AI systems often interact with each other, these hallucinations can spread from one agent to another, creating a network of misinformation.
So it's not just a single agent being misled, it's a whole system being compromised by this cascade of false information.
Precisely. And the document distinguishes between how this amplification happens in single-agent systems versus multi-agent systems.
How so?
Well, in a single-agent system, the hallucinations can be amplified through the agent's own internal processes, like reflection or memory recall. If the agent generates a hallucination and then later retrieves that same piece of information from its memory, it might mistakenly treat it as a verified fact, further solidifying the falsehood in its understanding.
It's like the AI is gaslighting itself.
In a way, yes. And in multi-agent systems, the risk is even greater because the misinformation can spread between agents through their communication channels and shared knowledge repositories. So one agent's hallucination can quickly become another agent's reality, leading to a widespread and potentially systemic failure.
And this really builds on the general risks associated with AI-generated misinformation that we discussed earlier in the context of LO 9.2025.
Absolutely. It's the same underlying problem, but the interconnectedness and autonomy of agentic AI systems make it much more difficult to contain and mitigate.
Let's talk specific scenarios. The example of sales orchestration, where false product details are gradually injected into the AI's responses, leading to increasingly inaccurate information being provided to customers, really highlights the insidious nature of these cascading hallucinations.
Right. It shows how a seemingly small and harmless error can gradually snowball into a major problem, eroding trust and potentially causing significant damage to a company's reputation and bottom line.
And the API call manipulation example, where the AI hallucinates API endpoints and potentially leaks sensitive data or compromises the system, shows how these hallucinations can have immediate and severe consequences.
Exactly. It's not just about misinformation. It's about those hallucinations leading to concrete actions that can compromise security and privacy.
And finally, the healthcare decision amplification scenario is a chilling reminder of the potential for life-threatening consequences when medical AI systems are affected by these cascading hallucinations.
It's a sobering thought. If an AI system that's supposed to be helping healthcare professionals make informed decisions is operating on false information, the results could be devastating.
Okay, enough scary scenarios. How do we prevent these hallucinations from spiraling out of control?
Well, we need robust output validation mechanisms. The system needs to be able to check the plausibility, consistency, and factual accuracy of the information the AI generates before it's acted upon or disseminated.
So like a fact-checking layer built into the AI system?
Precisely. And we also need to use multi-source validation, where the AI is required to cross-reference information from multiple independent and reliable sources before making a decision.
So don't just take the AI's word for it. Get a second opinion, or a third, or a fourth.
Exactly. And finally, for any critical decisions, especially in high-stakes domains like healthcare or finance, human oversight is essential. We need to have human experts in the loop to review the AI's outputs and make sure they're sound before they're implemented.
So it's about combining the strengths of AI with the wisdom and judgment of human experts.
Absolutely. It's about finding the right balance between automation and oversight.
Okay, that covers the first 5 threats in the OWASP threat model for agentic AIs. We've got a lot more ground to cover, but this is a good starting point.
It gives us a solid foundation for understanding the challenges we face in securing these powerful but potentially risky systems.
And for our listeners out there, we encourage you to delve deeper into the OWIS document itself and to really think critically about how these threats might manifest in the AI systems you interact with or develop.
It's about staying informed, staying vigilant, and being proactive in addressing these emerging security challenges.
Absolutely. We'll be back soon to continue our deep dive into the remaining threats and mitigation strategies, so stay tuned.
Until next time.
Thanks for listening.
Of course.